To this meeting of Buckinghamshire Council's Cabinet meeting on the 20th of July 2021. Just to say my apologies for being a couple of minutes late. I will take full responsibility of that. I was just finishing off a meeting upstairs, so I've come straight down and straight into this Cabinet meeting. So apologies to anyone who's been waiting online for the start of the meeting. I'm just going to remind colleagues around the room that we are being webcast. And therefore, would you please use the speakers on the desk in front of you? The reason for that is although we are in a building where we can actually hear each other very well across the room, if you want to be picked up and actually heard on the webcast, it's essential that you do use these speaker boxes. I'm sure I will be reminded as and when I forget, and I will try and do the same for colleagues as well. So please remember that. So thank you. I'm going to move us straight on to apologies for absence. And I have had one apology for absence. That's from Anita Cranmer, who's our Cabinet Member for Children's Services and Education. She has a quite significant family issue that she's had to deal with. Completely understand that issue, and she's quite right not to be here because of that. But she's more than ably deputised by her deputy, and I welcome Julie Ward. Good to see you here, and I know you'll do credit to the portfolio, so thanks very much for being here. I'm going to also just say at this stage, I'm going to propose a slight variation in the agenda running order. When we get to, there's two items on the agenda that require the ability to go into confidential session. That's items 7 and 8, but the confidential sections aren't until effectively 12 and 13. It just seems a bit silly that we discuss them in public, we then effectively talk about another series of issues, then we go into confidential to talk about items that we might have discussed potentially an hour beforehand. So what I'm going to suggest we do is just reshuffle the agenda. So we go from item 6 to item 9, then 10, then we do 7 and 8, and then go into confidential as required. So are colleagues okay with that? Everyone okay? Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. And I'll look to our Democratic Services colleagues to remind me if I stray from doing that. Thank you very much indeed. So having said that, I'm going to go now to the minutes of the last meeting. The minutes are in the pack that you've got. They are circulated to Cabinet colleagues in advance so they can check them for accuracy, so they don't have to do it on the spur of the moment now. But they are on pages 5 to 14 of the agenda pack for anybody that's following this online. I will read out, and I'll ask colleagues to read out the pages they're referring to, because it makes it much easier for any members of the public or other members who are non-executive members of the council to follow exactly what's being discussed. Can I just check with Cabinet colleagues whether you're content for me to approve the minutes as a true and accurate record? Thank you very much. Item 3 is declarations of interest, and again, for the benefit of members of the public, we are required to declare any interest we have, whether they're personal or pecuniary, i.e. financial, in any items on the agenda, quite rightly so. Most members of Cabinet, in fact all members of Cabinet, will have done that already. This is an opportunity, if there's any item where any other interest now comes to mind that you haven't previously declared that relates to that agenda item. It's not normally the case that that's required, but it is a formality I had to go through. So can I just ask colleagues whether there are any declarations of interest by Cabinet colleagues other than those already declared? There are none. That's fine. Thank you very much. Now, hot topics. Hot topics are, again, an item on the agenda every meeting. This is for members of the Cabinet to basically make known some key items relating to their portfolio. Particularly, it's an opportunity to speak directly to non-executive members of the council, to members of the public or to the media. It is absolutely not essential or even required that all members of Cabinet have hot topic items. It will vary from meeting to meeting, so there is no problem if they have not. I'm just going to kick this off because I just wanted to give a public update on where we are in relation to COVID, and then I'll move clockwise around this particular table. Members of the public and members of Cabinet will be aware that I've been doing a regular COVID newsletter to the public. That's been going out roughly every fortnight up until last week. Last week was the last one that I could do because it was published under the government's emergency legislation, which has now lapsed, and therefore that cannot continue unless members of the public sign up to our regular newsletters. They can do that on our council website. It's very easy to do. I would very much encourage members of the public to do that, because we will carry on issuing information and updates, not just on COVID, but we'll be able, because it's our own sign up effectively, to broaden out the information that's provided to include other topics like roads and bins and things like that that people are interested in. So please sign up. But in the last newsletter I sent out, I gave an update on the COVID situation in Buckinghamshire. I'm now going to update that again because we're obviously not unique in this area, that we're seeing a significant rise in the number of people with COVID. That's the infection rate. So that has now risen and stands currently on the latest data I have at 315.3 per 100,000. That compares with the South East average, which is slightly higher at 321.4. And across the whole of England, it's 425.3. So we are lower than both England and lower than the South East average, which is obviously good, but it has risen quite rapidly. I would again stress that is actually an infection rate, and that does not necessarily mean that people have been admitted to hospital or are seriously ill with it. You can be infected and in many cases can be asymptomatic and actually not suffer any noticeable effects from it. But just the infection rate, and it has risen quite significantly. We are noticing that the infection rate is significantly higher in the younger population. That's very similar to the national pattern, and certainly the highest rates are now in those aged under 30 years of age. So as one would expect, those that are probably most socially active, being out most, attending sporting events, meeting other people and so on, probably also have either only had one jab or may not yet have had any vaccination. They are the most likely currently to have the highest infection rate. In terms of the admissions to hospital, which means that you have some degree of seriousness associated with that infection, the good news is that currently there are less than 10 people within the Buckinghamshire Hospital Trust due to COVID. So that's relatively good news. Obviously it's serious for the people who are in there, but people do progress through the hospital trust. They can be admitted, stay for a period of time, and then will come out again. But currently there are less than 10 people in with COVID in the hospital trust. And they are noticeably, again, younger people. In the first and second waves, it tended to be the older population that were being admitted to the hospital trust. Now we're seeing predominantly people who are sort of 33 years of age or younger going into the hospital. Lastly, I just wanted to update people on the vaccination programme, which has gone incredibly well, I have to say. In Buckinghamshire, we have one of the highest vaccination rates, I think pretty well nationally, and we're seeing something like 90% of people aged over 40 who have been vaccinated, and over 83% have had their second dose. So that's very, very good indeed. It is clearly less when you get to the younger cohorts, though in the 20 to 39 age group, I've now been told that 68% have had their first dose, and nearly 24% have had their second dose. And if I can just make a general public plea, which is please come forward and have your vaccination. It is the surest way to protect yourself, to protect your family, to protect your friends, and to protect your community. It is very safe to do this, and it is the surest way for all of us to get out of this terrible infection that we have and get back to a more normal life. So that's where I am in terms of the update. I'll do a similar update tomorrow at the full council meeting. Having done that, if I could pass now to my colleague Angela McPherson, who is Deputy Leader with Health and Wellbeing.
Yes, thanks, Martin. Just a very brief update for members of the public, Cabinet members and colleagues. Just to say that the government has now issued guidance to allow health and social care workers not to self-isolate if they're contact traced. as a result, and that would be as a result of close contact with somebody with COVID. Not self-isolating will only be in exceptional circumstances, though, where staff shortages would result in health and safety risks. The employees would have to be double vaccinated and will require daily COVID tests to ensure they don't develop the virus. Of course, if they test positive, they will be required to self-isolate. So there's a bit of a change there that allows a bit more freedom and flexibility within those settings. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Angela. Gareth Williams?
Nothing from me.
Steve Broadbent?
Yes, 2 items, please, Leader.
Can I just suggest, by the way, we normally do this, but if you just introduce the portfolio, because obviously anybody watching this won't necessarily know the portfolio you're responsible for. So I can just address that to all colleagues. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Yeah, my name's Stephen Broadbent. I'm the Cabinet Member for Transport. 2 items for hot topics today with a weather theme, I think, given it's so hot outside. One is I just want to update everyone on grass cutting. The grass cutting teams, we have put additional resource into the cutting of the verges through our extra teams out on our network from the supply chain partners. Those of you who are mowing your own lawn at home will realise just how quick it's growing, how thick it is, and the volumes involved. Well, clearly that applies to our verges as well. So the teams do continue on, particularly in the rural programme, with the second planned cut. So I just want to reassure everyone that continues with that additional resource. And then possibly as a complete juxtaposition, given the temperatures out there, I just want to confirm that as of this week, our winter barns are full of salt. So whilst it's hot out there, we're already as a service thinking towards the winter. We have 10,500 tonnes of salt ready for gritting the roads. New drivers are going through refreshed HGV training, and our fleet is being serviced and being run out. So it might be slightly odd to talk about that on a hot day, but clearly winter preparation is well underway, and I'm pleased to note that, and I think it's reassuring for everyone to realise when the weather does change, we're ready for it.
Steve, thanks very much. And if I could just add a little bit to your grass issue, because you and I have exchanged some emails on this. I'm actually very proud of the fact that we've let some of those verges grow in order to support the wildlife and biodiversity in the rural areas, not obviously in towns or anything like that. And obviously that doesn't apply to sightlines, which are very important. We keep those clear for drivers. I know I've had a number of letters complaining they look untidy, but actually what I've tried to explain to people who've written to me is actually this is actually quite good practice in terms of increasing biodiversity and supporting wildlife. So I just hope we can get that message out there, because I think it's really a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. And my understanding is it may take 2 or 3 seasons for the soil fertility to increase sufficiently to give us a broader diversity of wildflowers there. But of course, we'll get different colours and types over time. But yes, clearly we will always prioritise the safety sightlines. But this is a long-term plan, I think, as I mentioned previously, to boost that biodiversity and space for our pollinating insects. So, we keep that under review and put it in verges where we can.
No, thanks, Stephen. It fits in very well with Peter Strachan's climate change and environment portfolio as well. It's very much something we're pledged to as part of our manifesto to deliver an upgrading of the environment across the county. Thanks. John Chilver. Nick Naylor.
Nothing from me, thank you, Leader.
Clive Harris.
Nothing from me, thank you, Leader.
Peter Strachan.
Nothing from me, Leader.
Steve Bowles.
Yes, Leader, I have 5 hot topics to relate to Cabinet. My name's Steve Bowles and I'm the Cabinet Member for Communities. In June, our Community and Development team and Public Health held a social isolation showcase to share information and learning about community projects and interventions which seek to prevent or address social isolation. Projects showcased included the Clare Foundation and their Digital Inclusion Project, Age UK Bucks county-wide befriending project, Mama Bee and their community youth projects. It was well received by partners, officers, councillors and members of the community boards as a great way to share how community projects are making a real difference. make connections and take away ideas that could be enhanced and replicated in other areas. And we look forward to more events like this in the future. I'm also pleased to announce that earlier this month, the voluntary and community sector enterprise infrastructure support contract was successfully awarded to Community Impact Bucks. The service aims to provide support that will contribute to the development of a strong, resilient, sustainable, diverse and vibrant VCSE sector in Buckinghamshire. And in partnership with the Council, Community Impact Bucks will continue to champion, promote and celebrate the work of the VCSE sector and the contribution it makes in Buckinghamshire. And this service will go live on the 1st of August. Also, it's great to see our community boards move forward in engaging with our youth. An example of this recently was our Aylesbury Community Board involved in the Youth Views project. Aylesbury Youth Action worked with young people to develop an app that young people in Aylesbury can use to share their views. 3 teams were shortlisted for the final exhibition, and the panel of judges included Councillor Mark Wynne, Chairman of the Aylesbury Community Board, as well as representatives from the Bucks New Uni, the LEP and Cube Video Limited. All judges agreed it was a fantastic afternoon, and the willing team will now develop their app for a public launch across Aylesbury. As we all know, schools across the county are now nearing the end of their summer term and starting the 6-week break. We understand that this extended break can be a source of stress and financial difficulty for some families. I'm delighted that utilising the recently extended government COVID local support grant, we are providing £70 digital food vouchers to families with children and young people eligible for 3 school meals or early years support. These vouchers will be sent out to eligible families via schools next week and provide support for the full summer school holiday period. In addition, we'll also be working closely with the voluntary and community sector and using the local support grant to support holiday support initiatives. And our Helping Hand team is also available to help direct people to the support that is right for them, whether this is from the voluntary or community sector or direct from the council. So if anyone is worried about access to food or other essentials and not sure what help is available, they can contact the council's Helping Hand support line on 01296 531151 or complete the online contact form. Also, the town and parish charter final draft and feedback was sent out last week, and we're looking to launch that the end of August, beginning of September. This is a really important facet of the council's localism agenda, and to me it signals our joint ambition and intent to work together across all forms of local government to deliver for our residents. Thank you. That's my hot topics.
Thanks very much, Steve, and some really good stuff there. I'm in particular just highlight the Helping Hands. It's a scheme we've run now through a lot of the school holidays. It's been really successful, and I know we're liaising very closely with the schools on it as well. So some really great work there, so thanks. Julie Ward.
Nothing from me, thank you, Leader.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. So that's all of the hot topic items, and thank you very much for some really good points there raised. That moves us on to question time. And again, for the benefit of members of the public, this is the opportunity for non-executive members of the council to hold the cabinet to account, to ask questions of them and to obtain answers. We do ask the questions are provided in advance. This is not an attempt to stifle questioning. Quite the opposite. It actually just gives us the opportunity to make sure that we can provide full and comprehensive answers to any non-executive questions that are raised. So having said that, we have a surprise appearance. No, not a surprise appearance at all. Robin is a regular attendee at this meeting. And Robin, you're welcome back again. Would you like to ask your question? And I think I know who it's directed at.
Yeah, thank you very much. Firstly, good to see you all fit and well and here today. And if you're free over the weekend, do come to Buckingham. We've got lots of events on. I've been talking to Angela and she's likely to attend some of them. I hope so anyway, by email. That's enough of a plug. But firstly, Leader, the leader of the Buckinghamshire Council recently suggested that Buckinghamshire had one of the most successful councils in England when it came to supporting local businesses through the pandemic. However, on reading through the national data and restart grant payments, the data suggests that Buckinghamshire Council's 108 among 309 English councils, paying around 16% of the £22 million funding available from the government. How does the Buckinghamshire Council reconcile these two different views of the council's performance? And most importantly, what future help can our local businesses expect to receive from Buckinghamshire Council going forward? It's a technical question, but it's good to clear these things up.
No, it's a really good question, Robin. Thanks very much for raising it. I'm going to say I'll reply on this one, obviously. I'm immensely proud of what we've done in terms of the financial support we provided right the way through the pandemic to the businesses across Buckinghamshire. We're predominantly, as you know, a small and medium enterprise county. So it's not just the big Pinewoods of this world, but it's the vast numbers, tens of thousands of small businesses that we wanted to help to survive through and then restart. And they actually provide so many of the jobs that people in this county actually are employed in. So that's been really, really important to us. Just to help you understand the difference, there are two different grants referred to. So the one you've referenced in your question is what was called the Local Restart Grant Scheme, the LSRG. LRGS rather. That is a grant that we were given to administer by central government. It was based on an estimate of what the amount of money would be required by this council area. And right across the country, the government's never got that estimate right for obvious reasons. It's always very hard to know exactly how many businesses will meet those criteria. The numbers you referred to are actually transposed. So what you've referred to as, if you like, only getting 16% out, actually the 16% refers to the amount that we haven't got out. So actually we've got 84% out. So actually we've done incredibly well in actually distributing the vast majority of that grant during the period. And since that award was last measured, it's actually gone up from 84% to now over 90% of that grant amount that's being distributed to our businesses, which is again a fantastic achievement and something I'm really, really proud of. There is a separate grant scheme which was called the Additional Restrictions Grant, and that was one that wasn't specified by national government and used us as a distributor. This second grant scheme, the Additional Restrictions Grant, was where they gave us some money to distribute and we were allowed to design the scheme so that we could determine the eligibility. And on that, we made a deliberate decision that we would try and extend it to as many businesses as possible, again, targeting the small and medium enterprises. It could go down to, quite frankly, 0 employees, i.e. a sole trader, and you did not need to have registered business rate premises. So again, you could be working from home as a sole trader, and you could apply to this scheme. And we were given £21 million by the government to distribute, and pretty well all of that money has gone. And at the last count, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, which we call BEIS normally in the jargon, rated us the second best in the country for distributing that business grant out to local businesses. From what I can recall, the most successful was a small urban unitary, so they had a much easier task in terms of distributing that grant. So I think we've got an immense amount to be proud of in the way that we've supported businesses. Overall, since the beginning of the pandemic, we've distributed over £166 million to Buckinghamshire businesses. And that's one of the reasons I hope that the businesses in this county will be able to stand back up and restart, really successfully. You ask about future support, and just to answer that question directly, what we do is work very closely with our main business support organisation, Bucks Business First, and we will refer people always in the first instance to BBF for frontline support, and it can be across a wide range of questions in terms of their business and how they can actually both successfully stand back up but also then thrive in the new economy. And we have also, as you know, Robin, put forward to government a very ambitious recovery programme, which we think fits very nicely with what the government announced last week. Boris Johnson announced what he called county deals. We're looking very much on a county deal basis to the government, and we put in a proposition that, were it successful, would bring a very large amount of financial support to the businesses in this county. So we're very much on the case, looking after and supporting the businesses of Buckinghamshire.
No, thank you very much for full and frank response. And please, I did provide the link to the officers which you transposed the figures in. Please, can you write to the government to make sure they put the right figures in their publications? Because had I not read those figures, I wouldn't ask you the question, Leader. Sure. So it would be nice to correct them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. I have to be honest, when I looked at it, it seemed to be the right way round. So I actually think it was the right way round, but I'll, by all means, the officers can double check that afterwards. Because I took your numbers and actually had a look at it when you sent the question through. But by all means, I'll get someone to double check that.
If it's my error, I'm quite happy to accept error. I make enough anyway, but I'm sure you don't make any, Leader. So let's just see where we are with it, mate.
I'm sure you'd be the first to point them out if I did, Robin.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Okay, we don't have any other questioners here, I don't believe. So I'm going to move us on to item 6. That's the forward plan, 28 days notice. And again, for anybody watching, this is basically a snapshot in time for the plan for the Cabinet and the items it will be considering. I particularly draw the attention of this forward plan to non-executive members of the Council so they can see what it is we're proposing to discuss and agree, and therefore they can make contact with the relevant Cabinet members and make sure their views are known prior to any decisions being made. So can I just ask, it's on pages 15 to 28 of the agenda pack, whether anyone has any comments or questions on that forward plan. Well, colleagues, look, if anyone's listening and interested, as I said, it's a snapshot in time. I would always advise people, particularly if they're watching this on a catch-up, possibly even up to a week or two after the event, to look at the latest version online, because it does change. Members happy to note the forward plan? Everyone content? Thank you very much indeed. That moves us on to the corporate performance indicators, item 9. As I said at the beginning, I've moved items 7 and 8 further down the agenda, so it's more sensible and we don't have members of the public disrupted by the ordering. So if we move to pages 53 to 80 rather, talking about the key performance indicators. I now have to find those pages myself since I've moved all the pages around. Right, okie doke. Now I'm going to ask John Chilver, as the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, to introduce this report. And we do have, I believe, one of your officers, John, is that right? Matthew Everett, who's Assistant Director Service Improvement, who's also available to answer any questions. Just looking. Hi, Matt. You're behind me. Good to see that. So over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Leader. John Chilver, Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources. So this report sets out the key performance indicators and targets proposed for reporting to Cabinet during the current financial year, with effect from the Q2 report. And there are 115 indicators in total, covering all 10 portfolios. They have been agreed with each directorate and with each portfolio holder. They will be reviewed annually, and they reflect the priorities in the corporate and portfolio plans. They include a number of new KPIs, which reflect new challenges such as meeting our climate change targets and supporting the recovery from the impact of COVID. Information for each KPI on benchmarking and the most recent performance is provided in the detailed appendix. And many thanks to officers for all the hard work they have put into preparing this report. So Cabinet is asked to approve the KPIs and associated targets.
John, thank you very much indeed. And it's always useful, I think, to have the KPIs because that way we can track our success. Something I'd just add, John, just slightly is obviously we've just had the May elections, so obviously we've got a new cabinet coming in. We obviously stood on a manifesto committing to deliver certain key priorities for our residents. I will be meeting with individual cabinet members, as you know, to discuss those priorities with them, and therefore I do reserve the right to maybe tweak some of these KPIs when we've had that discussion, so they clearly represent the priorities from our manifesto, and actually, if you like, we're looking at the right things to deliver on the residents' priorities that we stood on. So with that big caveat, just open it up for any comments or questions from colleagues. Deathly silence. Everyone's so keen on their KPIs. This is fantastic. Well, this looks like a slam dunk item, as we say. I expected lots more people saying, oh, hang on a minute, or whatever. No, that's fine. Angela.
Just to break the silence, I'm Angela McPherson, Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing. I mean, there are a lot of indicators here, and it's always good to keep a weather eye on them, and we don't want to make an industry of it. I think the focus for me, and what's encouraging to see across many of these indicators, is a focus on customer service and delivering the right outcomes for the residents of the county. And certainly in the adult social care portfolio, there's a thrust towards that, to seeing customer satisfaction monitored regularly. So that's encouraging, and that's something I'd like to see moving forward across all portfolios. Thanks, Leader.
And can I say, Angela, I mean, I completely and utterly agree with you. I mean, members of Cabinet would have heard me say this many, many times. I'm immensely focused on customer satisfaction and customer experience. I'll say candidly here, with the public listening, there are areas that I am well aware of that we are not delivering on well enough currently for our residents. I'm not comfortable with the quality of service in terms of people contacting the council. Although we have some excellent staff in our customer service centres, there are too many customers who wait too long to get through, and whose experience when they do get through isn't necessarily the best. That's why I've asked Tim Butcher, who's one of our deputy cabinet members, to really focus on how we can make improvements on that, and that's a real priority for me. I'm also aware that we have a £100 million programme over the next 4 years for improvement on our roads and pavements. They're not good enough. And I know Steve is really focused on how we can drive that improvement through with our contractors. And likewise, I'm very aware that the quality of some of, not all of, but some of our waste collection is not yet adequate. There are some really good reasons for that. But again, I know that Peter Strachan is very focused on driving improvement in those areas. And that relates predominantly to the old former Wickham and Chiltern district areas. So anybody listening, we absolutely accept there are areas we need to improve, and we're very well aware of that and focus on driving that improvement through. So there are some big priorities for us there. Just on a broader picture, issues like climate change, I know Peter is very focused on that. We have a very strong, ambitious programme on that. Improvements to the overall environment across the county, again, very focused on that. We referenced from Steve's portfolio earlier, the way in which we're looking at ways in which we can manage some of our assets better to improve wildlife and biodiversity across the county, the way in which we work with our local parish and town councils. I know Steve Bowles is very focused on, and driving up and closing that educational gap amongst so many of our young people, so that actually many of them can catch up from the disadvantages they've suffered, particularly because of the lockdown and COVID. I know is an area that Julie Ward and Anita is really focused on. So there's a lot of big priorities that we stood for election on that I want to see baked into these KPIs. So we really are looking at the right things. So it's a great start, though, to have these in front of us. John.
Well, just to come back on the point about the performance of the customer service centre, I completely agree. There are actually 7 indicators within the finance and resources portfolio, covering issues such as phone call waiting times, first-time resolution, web chat waiting times, and they will all be monitored very closely to ensure that we do improve on our performances.
John, thank you very much. And again, just to be really, really clear, so I don't send the wrong message out, I completely understand we have some fantastic staff, really fantastic, very dedicated staff in our customer centres, and I'm absolutely not being critical of them. Much of this relates to systems, processes, access to information and so on. which is the key to getting this right. So that's really where I want Tim focused. And we also, I used to run a customer service centre, many, many decades ago, and I know some of the KPIs, you need to be really clear what it is you're measuring, so you actually get that customer experience built into those KPIs, and so you're measuring the customer experience, not just, if you like, some of the internal attributes. So again, I obviously support John and commend these KPIs to you. They will be subject to some amendment as we get into the individual discussions with Cabinet members. Are members happy to agree the recommendations? That's on page 53. Is that agreed? Thank you very much, colleagues, for that. That moves us on to item 10, the Q1 Budget Monitoring Report for 2021-22. That's on pages 81 to 106 in the agenda pack, and it's the John Chilver Show. So, John, would you like to take us through the finance report?
Indeed, a busy morning. Yes, this is on page 81, and this report sets out the forecast year-end position for the current year based on the first quarter to June. Overall, there's a forecast revenue overspend of 500,000, which is made up of an overspend relating to COVID pressures of 1.4 million, offset by an underspend on business as usual of 900,000. And the breakdown by portfolio can be seen in Table 1 on page 82, showing that the largest forecast overspends are in the culture and leisure and transport portfolios, and Appendix 1 provides further details by portfolio. The overall forecast impact of COVID on additional costs and lost income is 6.2 million. Partly offset by government compensation of 2.8 million, which continued through to the end of June. And all portfolios will continue to look for further savings and income generation in order to bring forecast spend back in line with budget. The capital forecast can be seen in Table 2 on page 83, showing the forecast 3 million of slippage, which is only 1.6% of the total capital budget. And all portfolios currently have a RAG rating of green. And the main areas of slippage relate to flood defence schemes and work on Marlow Bridge. And finally, the two indicators in the last appendix at the end of the report show that we have met our targets, both for prompt payments of invoices and the level of unsecured debts.
Thanks very much, John. So I'm going to open this up in a second to any questions or comments from colleagues. Just again, for the public watching, this may sound like a very dull report, and it's all numbers, but actually this is the lifeblood of the council, and our ability to deliver services to the residents depends on the financial health of this council. We can only deliver what we can pay for. One of the things we spend a lot of time doing is building a balanced budget, looking at residents' priorities, reflected through the members that they elect, and then setting a budget where the money is aligned against those priorities. But we need to make sure as we go through the year that we constantly check that we're living within our means. As a council, we're not allowed effectively to overspend. We actually have to always balance our budget. If we don't, we risk issuing what's called a Section 114 notice, which sounds a bit technical, but effectively that means the council is bankrupt. And there have been a number of them recently. We've seen the council in Slough very recently issue a Section 114 notice where they've effectively gone bust, and also the council down in Croydon very recently issue a 114 notice and effectively go bust. And I have certainly been aware of the fact there are probably another 20 councils at least who are potentially, heading in the same trajectory. So, we by contrast are a financially well-run, well-managed council, which means we can continue to deliver on the priorities of our residents because we are so. So that's why reports like this are so important, may look dull, but actually are really, really important to our residents. Having said that, I just wanted to ask John maybe a question. We've got this small variance. I mean, I'm always keen to understand what the underlying trajectory is, because it's always clear to me that if we identify a trend, if you like, a systemic problem that's heading in the wrong direction, the earlier we tackle it, the better. So you stop this before it builds up so much momentum that it's actually quite hard to turn around. On the other hand, a sort of small blip that actually is just a little bit of phasing, if you like, it's not too much to worry about. John, are you confident we have enough knowledge here to actually say that we can manage this pressure and that it won't be developing into a more systemic problem, for example, by Q2?
Well, it's obviously early days yet. This is only Q1. There are pressures within the system. I wonder if our Section 151 officer might want to pick up on giving a bit more detail in reply to this question.
Really good point. Richard, can I introduce Richard Ambrose, who's our Section 151 officer? He effectively, in plain speak, is our head of finance. So over to you.
Thank you, Leader. So in terms of giving assurances, well, I suppose what I can say is that we closely monitor this. We report regularly through the corporate management team and obviously bring this forward to Cabinet. There are a lot of uncertainties this year, particularly to do with the pandemic, so it's not possible to give any firm assurances, but we are on top of it. We know what the position is. We are trying to take mitigating actions, and we will continue to report that regularly to Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Richard. That's obviously reassuring. And maybe I can just ask a sort of supplementary question to both yourself and John, which is to do with COVID. Obviously, over the last 18 months, we've had a number of financial shocks due to COVID. It's both affected our income plus increased our expenditure very dramatically. And we were very fortunate, not fortunate actually, just good management that got us in slightly below budget at the end of the last financial year. As we head forward, obviously we've had the sort of opening up day in theory yesterday, but we've still got a lot of underlying pressures coming through. We're seeing a rapid rise in our infection rate, which I reported at the beginning of the meeting. What sort of government support do we have, or could we anticipate, do you think, in terms of helping us manage the situation going forward over, let's say, the next 6 months or so? Are there any proposals from government, or is this something we should be raising with our members of parliament?
So when the budget was set, we did get some funding in recognition of some of the additional costs and lost income around COVID, and so we budgeted for those. There is also, as the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources said, there is a income protection scheme that ran out at the end of June, but obviously we will be claiming that lost income, things around parking and leisure and those sorts of things. So we're claiming a lot of that back. I think at the time of setting the budget, the thoughts were, we might have, things might be slightly further on. Obviously, restrictions have come off. All of local government is closely looking at this and will lobby. And if there are further additional costs, lost income, we will make a case to try and get further funding. What I would say is the government funded, I think, fairly in 2020-21, and we did generally recover all of our additional costs and lost income. So, if things get worse, I would hope that we would be able to claim some further funding back.
It's good because with a national debt of, 2.2 trillion now, I'm sure Rishi's got still some money, sloshing down the back of the settee. Maybe not. Other comments and questions, John?
Just to add to what Richard said, particular areas where we have suffered a loss of income has been parking and leisure, and I think that contributes to the forecast overspends, which I mentioned earlier in those portfolios. Also, property rentals, which unfortunately is not covered by the government compensation scheme, and we've just had to put in another 200,000 provision for lost rental income due to the extended lockdown. But as I think it says in paragraph 2.3, the Council will continue to lobby government for the full recovery of income losses.
No, thanks, John. And that's a really good, important thing to flag to residents and non-executive members watching, just how severely our income can be affected. I mean, stop me if I'm wrong, John, but I seem to recall we used to get something like 1.2 million a month from car parking. which was a massive subsidy effectively for underpinning the frontline services that we deliver for residents. The impact of COVID, fewer people commuting, almost nobody commuting, has really hit that very hard. So we're going to have significant financial pressures from that. Certainly when we look ahead to next year's budget. Likewise, if we're going to see potential tenants in some of our commercial property, if they exercise break clauses, again, potentially impacting on that commercial income. And it'll be interesting looking at Clive to see whether, the take-up at our leisure centres bounces back, or whether, in fact, people have found alternative ways of keeping fit, and maybe we won't get the same management fee income from leisure centres. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the year ahead. Just see if anyone else has any questions on this item. No? Okay. A very important item we're going to keep very much under scrutiny as we go forward. The recommendation is to note the report and the risks and the opportunities contained within it. Colleagues content to agree the recommendation? Thank you very much. I think that brings us back to the Future High Streets Fund. Now we have, just for the people watching, we have two items, the Future High Streets Fund initial programme and then Orchard House High Wycombe, which we are both going to discuss in public, but there are confidential annexes to both, which relate to the finances of both. So what I'm going to propose is that we discuss both in public first, then we resolve to go into confidential session, and then we'll come back into public to report on the conclusions from the discussion and to formally close the meeting. So hopefully that's agreeable to colleagues. So, John, if I could ask you to introduce the first item, formally item 7, on pages 107, 108 of the public report.
Thank you very much. Future High Streets Fund. Following a successful bid for government funding in 2019, High Wycombe is one of 72 towns to be awarded a grant for the Future High Streets Fund. And the council is topping up the 11.7 million grant from government to make a total investment of 15 million as an integral part of our High Wycombe regeneration programme. The funding has to be spent in 3 annual segments, finishing by the 31st of March 2024, and the initial tranche was delayed by COVID, so there is some urgency to get this programme up and running. It's front-loaded in the first year, both to benefit the town as the economy recovers from COVID, and to demonstrate delivery in order to secure the second and third year funding from the government. So Cabinet is asked to approve the first phase of the programme using the 6.7 million grant funding which we have recently received. By acquiring, renovating and repurposing a number of town centre properties, we will be playing a significant role in ensuring the future vitality and diversity of High Wycombe Town Centre and making it a place that residents and visitors will enjoy spending time in. We will also be improving the setting of use of heritage assets such as the Guildhall and Little Market House. The overall vision, as the paper says, is of the Roman agora, a marketplace where citizens come to shop, trade, do business, chat and generally chill out, what is known as the experience economy. And further details are in the confidential appendix which the leader mentioned at the end of the report.
Thank you, John. Again, I'm going to open this up in a second for comments and questions from colleagues. Can I just say, very firmly in public, I think this is fantastic news and a real credit to you and the team that have put this in. I know, colleagues have worked across portfolio on this. It's part of our commitment in our manifesto to the regeneration of our important town and village centres. This is a tremendous first step along that road. There's going to be over £15 million invested in High Wycombe as a town, 15.2 million I think it is, and there's an ambitious programme here of property purchases, reprovision, regeneration of those properties, in the best interests of the town. It's just a fantastic achievement, it really is. So congratulations to everybody involved, really exciting. Any comments or questions in public from colleagues? Steve.
Thank you, Leader. It might slightly straddle into finance, so if it needs to go, John, then let me know. But you say in the executive summary of the report, it talks about the first tranche of the grant coming, and it's based on a specific and specified development programme. How do we best ensure pace of delivery, and are there triggers in there that deliver second and third tranches, or however many tranches there may be, please?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, we do need to demonstrate to the government pace of delivery during the first year. We do have an agreed list of properties which government has confirmed and supported. So if Cabinet gives the go-ahead today, we will immediately launch into the process of negotiations for those. Officers are also very closely monitoring the town centre property market. There is the opportunity to substitute other properties if, for one reason or another, the properties which have been identified are not able to be delivered. So it's very important that we do have alternative uses lined up, and that we continue to very closely monitor the opportunities to rapidly enter into negotiations, and that we have a process which will enable us to secure these acquisitions smoothly and quickly. Obviously, with all the caveats around due diligence and decision-making that are very important to be put in place.
Thanks, John. Any other comments in public on this item? So just for the benefit of the public, we will be discussing the financials of this in a confidential session, which for obvious reasons will be confidential because it's talking about money and things like that. Then we'll come back and report the final agreement in the public domain. If there are no other comments on it at this stage, I'm going to suggest then that we move on to the second item that's in the public domain, that is Orchard House, High Wycombe. And again, that's on pages 43 to 52 of your agenda pack. And I know you won't be able to guess who is going to introduce this item, but it is no one other than John Chilver. John.
Sorry about this. Busy morning, as I said. Orchard House. This development in the Cressex area of High Wycombe will provide a state-of-the-art new ambulance resource facility thanks to a creative new partnership between the Council and the South Central Ambulance Service, known as SCAS. The Council, which owns the 1.4-acre site, will build an environmentally sustainable new facility to SCAS's design, and SCAS will then lease the facility through a long-term rental arrangement. This brand new facility will replace the smaller, outdated ambulance station in West End Street, which is no longer fit for purpose, and will help SCAS better meet required response times and patient needs. And just to reassure local residents who may be concerned about the noise from ambulance sirens, SCAS operates on a hub and spoke model, so while the new centre will be the hub, the emergency ambulances will operate from a number of designated standby points elsewhere. There are a range of benefits to this project as set out in paragraph 2.4, and it's a very good example of public sector bodies working together to benefit the community. More details are in the appendix.
Thank you, John. And again, just open it up for comments. Angela.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, John, for that. I'm very supportive of this in terms of the two organisations working together to deliver this potential new facility. It obviously has to go through planning. And I'm interested to hear that it's going to improve the response times of SCAS. You may not have much detail on that, John, I appreciate that, but I think it's very important that those blue light services operate as slickly and as swiftly as possible, and I understand that this facility will enable the restocking and the cleaning of the vehicles to enable those faster response times. If you've got any details on that, it would be really useful to know, but otherwise we can find that out another time. But I'm very supportive. And also, in addition to that, the fact it's an environmentally sustainable site, and it'll be interesting to see the plans coming forward. Thank you.
Yes, as I said earlier, SCAS will be involved in the detailed design, so they will ensure that it will fully meet their current and future operational needs as they adapt their services. It will also provide local employment and volunteering opportunities for local residents, and it will help to strengthen resilience and protect the vulnerable, all of which are our corporate targets. And as you say, it's a sustainable and eco-conscious design and a much greener footprint than the current facility. Transport impact assessment will be part of the future planning application, but there's no indication that there will be any transport issues around this new development.
Thanks very much. Looking to see if there are any other ayes. Gareth.
Gareth Williams, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Planning and Regeneration, but formerly Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board. It's great to see initiatives like this coming forwards, particularly the One Public Estate, working together with our health partners, as we have indeed throughout the whole pandemic and through the COVID response. So this is yet another good example, I think, of us collaborating together in the interests of residents. So it's good to see this, definitely support it. And I know the local MP has been very supportive of further health provision in the area. So just checking, presumably he is also supportive of this initiative.
Yes, I spoke to him last week. He is fully supportive of this. He recognises the need for a new facility, and he is very much looking forward to this being provided.
Maybe I could just add, because I've spoken to our MP as well for Wickham, who I know is really focused on the whole health and welfare provision for his residents and constituents. And I know he is very supportive of this, and it's part of the provision of health in the Wickham area that he's very strongly championed. So this is very good news for those residents. Can I just check whether anybody else has any comments or questions? Hopefully pretty straightforward, this one, actually. If there are not, then may I suggest then that what we now do is enter into the confidential session. That requires me to read item 11 out, which is the formal exclusion of the public. There are no members of the public physically present here, but we will disconnect the webcasting during the session. So the resolution is to resolve that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act. Paragraph 3, information relating to the financial or business affair of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Can I just ask if it is so resolved? Agreed? Thank you. So if I could just ask our Democratic Services officers to disconnect the webcast for a short period of time while we discuss these items. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're just recommencing this meeting of the Cabinet on the 20th of July 2021. We were on the items that related to the Future High Street Fund. That was originally item 7, and also Orchard House, High Wycombe, which was originally item 8. We've gone into confidential session to discuss the financials And can I just ask members if they are content to agree the recommendations as proposed? Agreed. Thank you very much for that. So that concludes the items on this morning's Cabinet. The item 15, the date of the next meeting, that is on the 7th of September at 10 a.m. And having said that, may I thank Cabinet colleagues for their attendance this morning. I wish anybody watching online the very best for the rest of the day. I gather it's very warm outside, so enjoy the weather. If you are going away, have a really good holiday, and we'll be back in September for the next Cabinet meeting. Thank you all very much indeed. Meeting concluded.